In March of 2020, after a $6 million renovation, the Bailey Matthews National Shell Museum reopened with 11 aquarium tanks, including 2 touch pools for visitors to explore. What does it take to keep all these animals healthy and happy? We're going on a tour behind the tanks with the 2 scientists who care for these mollusks, fish, and other creatures, Rebecca Mensch, Senior Biologist and Registrar, and Carly Hulse, Senior Aquarist. Both hold degrees in marine biology and specialized training in maintaining live mollusks. Don't be surprised by the noise. There's extensive specialized equipment behind the tanks.
These are our quarantine systems. So when our animals come into the museum, they go through a quarantine process. With invertebrate animals, usually the quarantine length is 45 days. So this is a standalone system. Each one of these can be isolated, or we can use this as one whole system. So this is another one of our quarantine systems. This one is specifically designed for corals and giant clams. It's much shallower, and it has special coral grow lights on them. This system is specifically designed for animals that need photosynthesis. So without this really intense grow light, the algae that's in their bodies isn't going to be able to do photosynthesis, which means that the animals, the corals that are hosting those algae, called zooxanthellae, are not going to be able to feed. So they'll basically end up starving to death without these special lights in the shallow water. All of our animals have different dietary needs, and we have all sorts of different food to make sure we're taking care of our animals properly. So some of our food is for herbivores. These are sheets of seaweed. It's called nori. This is the same thing that you wrap sushi in. A lot of our conchs like to eat this. Also for herbivores, we have some types of pellets. So these are pellets also made out of algae and then pressed into these smaller pellets. So some of our cowries and some of our conchs eat this. We use this for our different fish. So all of like our reef fish, all of our smaller, nice, pretty, colorful ones, they all eat different types of pellets. And then we have filter feeders. So all of our bivalves are filter feeders, and they eat phytoplankton that's suspended in the water. What we do is we add it in. So we turn off the system for about a half hour and add in some of this super concentrated phytoplankton that the animals will just filter out of the water just like they would in their natural habitat. And then we have some animals that are a little more particular about their food. So these are frozen clams. So these are human-grade seafood. They've gone through all the FDA inspections, so we know they're super clean and healthy. Some of our local gastropods, like the lightning whelk, like to eat bivalves. The shrimp is for a couple of different animals. Some of our local animals do scavenge on this. So say our banded tulip, our scrawled cowfish. They like to eat a lot of different meaty food. And these are also food for our octopus. They're all carnivores. So they eat things like clams and shrimp and different types of fish and crab. So a lot of the fancy seafood that we like to go out and eat, our octopuses like that as well.
So this is our giant Pacific octopus habitat, and you'll notice here how we have this lovely astroturf. Octopuses are the masters of disguise and of escaping. Their suckers actually cannot suction onto the astroturf. So we have astroturf lining this entire exhibit. Here we have about a 1,000-gallon system. And when we were building the aquarium, we actually had to put in this exhibit before we could build walls down here. Back here we have our filtration system for the giant Pacific octopus. The octopus comes from a colder climate, so we have a very large heat exchanger on there to keep our temperature between 50 and 55 degrees. We also have a larger sump. That is because the octopus does have the ability to ink if it were to get very overwhelmed. So we want to make sure that we have the larger sump and the larger filtration so the ink would come out pretty quickly. One of my favorite facts about the giant Pacific octopus is that a fully grown male can lift 30 pounds with one sucker. And they have over 1,000 suckers between all 8 arms. One of the reasons that we know that octopuses and cephalopods in general are so intelligent is due to their ability to solve problems, puzzles, and different mazes. So enrichment is anything that stimulates or encourages those natural foraging and curious behaviors that the octopus might have. Some types of enrichment are with these various puzzles and dog toys. We give them shape toys, and we'll also put food inside there. They get enrichment daily, and it keeps them happy and healthy. The thing that we do is we target train our octopus. We put this in the water, and that's the octopus's cue. It is time to interact with us. And so the octopus will simply touch this with one of his arms, and then we will reward him with either food or a toy. And this is really, really helpful because we can do exams with our vet, and it makes it less stressful for him and also less stressful for us. When we first got the octopus, we learned that he didn't like men, and he also did not particularly care for baseball hats. During an interaction, the man that was up here, he actually had a hat on, and the octopus went into a very defensive pose and would not go near us during the entire thing. They are so intelligent that they can actually tell the difference between myself and everyone else. They taste our skin, and it tastes different to them.
So female octopuses tend to like women better because they can taste our estrogen, and male octopuses tend to like men better because they can taste the testosterone. So it's not just something as simple as, oh, did we have lotion on or something? They can actually taste all of the chemicals that are going on in our body that we can't even smell on each other.
We are very fortunate to have a certified aquatic vet. She is Dr. Heather Barron, and she's actually from Crow Clinic on the island. So she does come over twice a month, and she'll do full physicals on everybody. Not much is known as far as medicine for mollusks. So we're on the forefront here. We are hoping to do more research as far as that so we can make an impact in the public aquarium community. One of the really cool things other things that we've done is ultrasounds with the octopus.
Another thing that we have in the lab is our whole water filtration system. So all of the animals that we have in are saltwater animals. So all of our systems are self-contained. So that means that each system can have its own parameters. We can tweak temperatures, salinity levels, all those different things can be specific for each exhibit. So first, when it comes in, it goes through what's called mechanical filtration, which is kind of like a sieve. And these are called filter socks. And then after that, this chamber, which has UV light in it, it's going to be able to kill off any bacteria or viruses that might be growing in the water. Then it goes through another chamber which has a ton of surface area for good bacteria to be growing in. So this good bacteria is able to convert ammonia from the waste from the animals into some less toxic forms of nitrogenous waste. And then into what's called a protein skimmer. It swirls the water all around and creates bubbles, and any lipids are going to attach to those bubbles, and then they come up and they burst up here.
So water quality is one of the most important parts of our job because that is essentially their total environment. We have to test for their pH, the salinity, and the ammonia, nitrites, nitrates, calcium, and phosphates. So we want to look at the water as a whole just to make sure that the animals are getting the proper water quality and they're not having large fluctuations in their water.
Our mollusks live for a wide variety of ages. Many of the mollusks around the world, there's no research about how long they live. So for a lot of our animals, especially our local stuff, when we get them at adult sizes, and there really just isn't any research of how long does that mean they have left. So some of the species, there's a lot know it. The giant Pacific octopus, they're considered having a super long life as far as octopus go, which is 3 to 5 years. but we're not getting them at babies. We're getting them a little further along when they're larger. So we don't know the exact hatch date for them, and we have to estimate. So with octopuses, the smaller octopuses, we usually estimate around 6 months tends to be the size that you tend to get them at. With giant Pacific octopuses, somewhere in the year-ish range. So then you can kind of estimate how much longer you expect to have that animal. We've got some California sea hares that are a really big hit in our cold water touch pool. Those only have a lifespan of a little over a year, and we get them at adult sizes. So those are ones that also we expect to have for a shorter amount of time. But some of our local ones like horse conchs and lightning whelks that have a longer lifespan, we have actually a big lightning whelk that we've had for 4 years. That's actually some of our behind the scenes research that we're doing, is trying to figure out lifespans of mollusks. So certain species breed very easily in captivity, and in certain species it's very, very difficult. So for instance, octopuses, they tend to be very aggressive after mating, so mating in captivity is not something usually attempted. Whereas our banded tulips, basically we can't stop them from mating. If you've got banded tulips in the system together, they're gonna mate, and we have viable eggs and viable offspring that come out consistently throughout the years. Then we have yet other ones that are still ongoing research. Hopefully the next step for the Junonia research would be to get a large female Junonia and see if we can have any breeding happening with our 2 large males that we have right now. So there's a lot of factors that go into deciding which animals can go in which systems together. Usually the term is called tank mate. So the first thing you have to take into consideration is the actual habitat. What is the temperature? Is it sandy or rocky? What's the flow like? What's the lighting like? So that's the first thing. Of those things all have to be similar for all of the animals. And then the next big thing is feeding. Basically, will they pick on each other? Will they try to eat each other? Is there any type of aggression that goes into each other? So there's kind of these 2 big factors of how the animals actually interact with each other, and then the environmental factors that have to be considered. So we get our animals from a variety of different areas. With our local animals, we have a special activities license through the state that allows us to go out and hand collect a certain amount of animals for education and research. So the animals that are in our warm water touch pool, those are ones that we've gone out and hand collected. Some of our animals are aquacultured, which means born and raised in captivity. So like our giant clams, all of our corals, none of those are taken from the wild. The California sea hares, those are actually from a research center at the University of Miami. Those animals are usually sold for biomedical research. We are just kind of the oddballs of their purchasers who actually are keeping them to keep them alive. And then we also have animals that are coming from very specific vendors that only supply to aquaria. We do a lot of due diligence to make sure that the places that we're getting them from are all regulated and certified and have all of their licenses and everything.
One of my favorite things is seeing the kids light up about an octopus. A lot of kids, especially little girls, are usually grossed out by the slimy things. So if I can convince a little kid that a mollusk is cooler than a dolphin, game over. Like, that is the best day. And I've done it 3 times since we've been open, and it was awesome.
So the biggest kind of aha moment that guests have is generally finding out that seashells are parts of animals. About 95% of our guests can't really fully explain what a shell is. We ask them, what is a shell, or where does a shell come from? They kind of say, oh, the ocean, or oh, it's a rock, or I never thought about it. So when they actually have that moment of going, oh, it's an animal, that is usually the biggest aha moment for guests, and kind of the coolest thing to see, because now you've suddenly just completely changed the way they look at the ocean, the way that they look at shelling, the way they look at all of the rest of the exhibits. And a lot of times this happens in a couple of different places, but the big place is at the touch pool, where they have a chance to have that one-on-one interaction with an educator, and that educator can point these things out to them. But they also get a chance to touch and feel, and for many people that physical interaction is where it finally cements, and they can see it moving, and they can see it looking back at them. And it finally cements to them of like, oh, it's an animal, and it has eyes, and it can see me. So that's usually the big aha moment for most of our guests.